Well, probably everybody remembers their chemistry class, where they would understand that there's a pH scale, which measures a degree of acidity. In a minute, I'll tell you exactly, technically, what acidity is. It's just simply a free hydrogen ion, but so there was a scale from 0 to 14. You might have remembered that in school, a colored scale. 7 is neutral. We know acid rain gets to be when it's like below 7, that 7 is neutral. We don't want, and so we realize because of acid rain that the environment is changing, and we see this scale from 1 to 14, 7 being neutral. We know that you might have had to take chemistry to remember this, but the blood has to be slightly alkaline, 7.35 to 7.45 in order for life to exist. So it's a kind of narrow window that the pH has to be. And if we're gardeners, we probably know they will say, when you plant these plants, test the pH of your soil. This particular plant likes acid soil. This particular crop likes alkaline soil. So there's lots of applications of pH balance in the general life that we do. In simple terms, you could think, well, very acid is like hydrochloric acid, very acid, like down towards the 1 land. And then very alkaline is like bleach or baking soda, which is towards the 14 end. And that acid base has a balance, of course. And if you stray too far in one direction, the plants don't grow, or your blood doesn't grow. Or you stray too far in the other direction, the same thing. It's not compatible with human life, or it's not compatible with the particular function of the animal feed or the plant feed, or the pH of the oceans is very interesting now. It's becoming so acidic because of the change in climate. When you change climate, different plants grow, and these plants are acid producing, but also we have to, the acids, like when we have a chimney that's putting out uncombusted carbons. Those carbons go to the sky, and then they fall back down to the earth, and they fall back down to the earth often in the oceans. The oceans buffer those acids with things like carbonate, things like the shells of plants, things like the coral reefs. And so we have a great deal of destruction of the oceans, the changing of pH in ocean, where a lot of if you might have been in Florida, at times you can't swim because there's only jellyfish. And that's because jellyfish survive in that particular environment. Or up north here, the swimming areas are often closed because the water's too hot and too much algae that's also acid forming. Certain toxins develop. So it's a chemical balance. It's a chemical issue of how much free acid. Now, just not to bore people too much, but free acid is a hydrogen ion, just the simplest ion in the world, an H+. And then an acid is something that has that free hydrogen, and an alkaline substance is something that can buffer or neutralize, so to speak, that acid to get it back more towards the middle range. It's a dance of chemicals and electrons.
And I don't want people to glaze over because they don't want to know about chemistry, but and I do want to get into the really practical stuff, why this is so important to know. But I want to tell you, because I know you're in Michigan, that I read an article about a lake in Michigan where they were getting all this acid rain, and so the fish started coating themselves in mucus to protect themselves from the acid rain, and then they smothered to death. So they're losing the fish population. Just another example of how that shows up in nature.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was one of those things that stuck in my mind for maybe 30 years now.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I want to point out that the blood itself, our blood, is very tightly regulated in its pH. And I think people get real confused because a lot of people dispute this theory because they say it can't be too alkaline or you'll die, or too acid when you die, but that's the blood. So throughout the whole body, there's all these organs that have different pH, like the stomach and the vagina and the mouth and the gut and all. Can we just kind of walk through the digestive tract and talk about how the pH changes from the mouth to the stomach to the colon?
Well, yeah. I mean, we could talk a tad bit about that. I'm not really an expert on the digestion side, but certainly the oral cavity, if that gets acidic, like we eat sugars, and then that is acid forming, the bacteria grow that produce acidity, that it can lead to damaging of the teeth. That's quite well known. The oral cavity, you'd like to have alkaline. We know that the stomach is very acidic. You want the stomach to be acidic. The strongest acid in the body is hydrochloric acid that can actually, those little hydrogen ions are looking for something to grab onto, and so they actually have an electron transfer with, like, that the food we digest, the food we eat, so it helps to break down that food. Acid has the capacity to break down.
Yeah,
So
especially the proteins, and it
especially the
helps
proteins.
extract out things like B12 and minerals, particularly minerals
Yeah,
too. So it's important in
exactly,
the
exactly.
stomach, but then down in the small intestine you get alkaline again, but you get acidic down in the colon, so that the microbes live there and need to be, they're acid loving
Yeah,
bacteria
yeah,
basically. So yeah, so
yes,
I just think that's fascinating. Confusing actually is because there's the blood, which is tightly regulated, and then there's places all over the body. The vagina is more acidic. If a woman makes love with a man and he has sperm in there, he's changing the pH of the vagina, and she can
yes,
get yeast
exactly.
infections and so on too. So that's one simple thing to know. But so I wanted to. So I don't
But
think people know. Oh, go ahead.
well, I want to say you're absolutely right, Don, and we talk about it in kind of general terms because we're focusing on the survival of the body and that the blood pH must be particular. But you're absolutely right. There's different compartments in the body that have different pHs, and that very acid chime from the stomach goes to the pancreas. The pancreas produces all this, these buffering, all this bicarbonate, and the whole, and like you say, then into the intestine, it tends to change pH depending on the situation of the microbes. And so, yeah, it's that's right. Every compartment can have its own particular pH, and I didn't mean to simplify that too much. But we're looking at the
Well, I
body
just
as a
think
whole.
we
Yeah.
need to be more clear for people, because I think this is just one area that there's a lot of confusion around, and even with
Right, right, right.
practitioners. So the thing to know, so you can do a very simple test in the morning when you wake up, and you explain this in the book. You have test strips that are my favorite ones to use because they're very durable. Instead
Uh,
of those, they have like testing where there's like a paper thing,
yeah, the paper.
and
Yeah.
you strip them out. I don't really like those as much, but they're fine if that's all you've got. But you want to talk about testing, like how would somebody know if their body, if their body is too acidic or too alkaline or balanced? How can we test for that?
Right, right, right. So what seems to be pretty, you'd love to be able to take the blood, and study that blood, look at the pH, but you can't do it. You have to, even if your doctor pulls your blood, you have to measure it right quickly because it will soon, it will soon change the pH. So the clinically relevant technique is to look at the urine, and there's quite a bit of data saying that the urine is, if we're looking at the kind of acidity, what we call metabolic acidity, if we look at the impact of different foods on the pH, then we look at the first morning urine. And the first morning urine is a very good indicator of a pH balance and acid load. And acid load is really an indicator of mineral adequacy because the compounds that alkalize are attached to minerals most frequently, like potassium citrate, which becomes potassium bicarb in the body, or magnesium alkyl citrate. So yeah, you want to measure the first morning urine. We have in the book, the Acid-Alkaline Food Guide, I discuss that technology, and we actually have a pH test kit at betterbones.com and alkalineforlife.com. We have a pH test kit that gives you the book and suggestions on how to develop a diet that'll get the proper pH, a high mineral diet, and then these strips to measure your first morning urine. And what you want the first morning urine to be is like 6.5, just either slightly acidic, to 7.5, right around neutral, remember, which is 7.